Asking someone about their favorite FromSoft title is like asking what fast food restaurant they visit most. Most are probably gonna give you the obvious. Sometimes they've seen some shit. Their life has been rough, and you can tell this helped them get through it. People go here? But every now and then you meet a true connoisseur, someone with refined taste and a real eye for artistry. And they go to Carl's Jr. Bloodborne is the reason I own a PS4. I bought that this year. My first real introduction to the game was fucking Jacksepticeye's playthrough in 2022, and before I even fully realized what I was watching, partly because there was an Irishman screaming over it, "Oh God! Whoa, Jesus! Pig and bone!" I was already obsessed. Bloodborne holds a special place in my heart, not just because it's an amazing game, but also because it introduced me to my favorite genres and themes and stories. I didn't know how much I liked beast-coated gothic aesthetics until I played this game. It was my first foray into Lovecraft's cosmic horror and defined that fear of the grandiose and unknown that I'd had my entire life but was never able to put words to, let alone personify. I'd better get fucking AP credit for that line. I used the word foray. It's a game with so many working parts that don't seem like they should work together, but somehow meld seamlessly. And that's despite the fact that the game's design fundamentally goes against its own premise and inspirations. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I've got to stretch this out. You've seen the runtime. So without further ado, let's talk about Bloodborne. I'm wearing this hat for the rest of the video. I never get to wear this thing. I need an excuse. Also, spoiler warnings for all of Bloodborne. If you've watched my previous videos in this style with the bright fuck you red thumbnails, then you'll know that I am a total slut for well-developed worlds. Is that a fictional city with a documented history of trade and legislation? I need to go get my dick pills. And few developers can build a world more compelling than FromSoft. From Lordran to the lands between, FromSoft are brilliant when it comes to making fleshed out and explorable worlds. And Bloodborne is no exception. Welcome to Yharnam. Yharnam is this gothic, Victorian, depressing city where almost everyone is slowly being turned into beasts and knife crime is at an all-time high. Brexit, fish and chips, God save the king. By the time you arrive in Yharnam, everything's already pretty whacked out. FromSoft games often follow a pretty similar pattern of world building / storytelling, which is everything was poppin', stuff got fucked up, and now the player's here and it's their job to clean shit up. You wanna know how bad it is? This Yharnam? It's not even the original Yharnam. That's better. Yeah, they fucked up the first Yharnam, so they built a second one on top of the first one. I have a great idea. Now, when I talk about world building, I think what some people think I mean by that is like the physical construction of the world. There's gonna be a castle, next to that there's gonna be another castle, and then between those two there's gonna be a moat, and underneath the moat there's gonna be another castle, just so many castles. And while yes, the castle to moat ratio is part of world building, in my opinion, it's probably the least interesting part. Interesting world building is done in the details and the laws of the world. For example, if you're gonna have a long history of a magic system in your world, it can't develop exactly like the real world has because it has different rules that you need to account for and apply. I think one of the easiest examples for people to wrap their head around is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Most of the things in the different nations that would typically be automated somehow are just replaced with bending. Think the earth-bending powered trolley cars, or the Northern Water Tribe's walls not having doors because they just melt them and put them back up. And on top of that, it makes sense for the first nation to industrialize and push for fire and steam-powered things to be the fire nation, not just because of their imperialist mindset, but because of the element they control. One of my favorite ways that Bloodborne builds out its world is by integrating core gaming mechanics into the larger world and vice versa. For example, everything in the game surrounding blood. As you're quickly told after starting the game, Yharnam is the home of blood ministration. Alright, I'm gonna get overly nerdy about those two words right there. Blood in Bloodborne is special. Everyone's not just really obsessed with O negative. Yharnam blood has advanced healing properties. Think like Neosporin, but slightly better. And according to Google Dictionary, because I'm a lazy piece of shit, ministration has two definitions: the provision of assistance or care, or the services of a minister of religion or of a religious institution. And if you've never played the game, I'll explain in a minute that both of these definitions work for blood ministration. But what the term blood ministration also does is immediately set you on edge for what's about to happen in this world. Blood ministration is not a thing that exists in the real world. I'm sorry, you can't go steal from your local blood bank and get superpowers. But as I said, both of these are obviously real words. You know, or at least have heard of the words blood and ministration, and you know that they typically don't go together. This is the type of thing you see pretty commonly in things like analog horror, which thrives on that sense of being recognizable but off. I'm gonna steal one of my favorite examples of this from Markiplier and the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park Historic Archive, which in this video seems to be showing a typical EAS announcement. You know this, that sound used to interrupt Word Girl on PBS. But the exact warning that's being issued is a geobiological activity advisory. You know geological, and you know biological, but putting the two together freaks you the fuck out. It's Ratatouille with the cheese and the strawberry, but instead of fireworks, he gets unforeseen horrors. Again, blood, menstruation, it's weird, it's freaky, I really like it. I have now spent way too long talking about literally the first 15 seconds of this game. Blood vials are your main healing item throughout the game, where most games would just establish that fact as a game mechanic and then move on, think like Mario mushrooms or something like that. Bloodborne says, actually, we have an entire church based around your healing mechanic. Like, a good 70% of the problems in this world are from your main healing mechanic. Not just werewolf-wise, but also socially. The healing church has unlimited access to what seems like a miracle, and so they have the social power and oppressiveness that comes with that. You see them use it to villainize and victimize different groups based on how it benefits them. Is this game woke? And not only that, but if you've ever seen Sweeney Todd, then you know that if you go around fucking slitting throats, then that gets a little messy. So in Bloodborne, when you kill shit and they bleed on you, that also heals you. Two of the women you can save in this game offer you their blood as payment. I really like the blood systems in this game. I think a blood-based economy is pretty neat. Bear market, bull market, doesn't matter. We slaughtered both for their fluids. Or looking at insight, a sort of more difficult to get currency that you can also use to buy some stuff. Think of it like Clash of Clans gems. And it could have stopped there, but no! Insight is the representation of your knowledge of horrors beyond human understanding. Having too much insight physically changes the enemies and locations in the world. If you have too much, it reveals secrets that you shouldn't be able to see and makes some enemies more difficult. But on the flip side, if you have no insight and are too batshit stupid to see the world as it really is, that can actually work out in your favor by getting rid of enemies that you're too dumb to see. And also, it has a school around it that's in an intellectual war with the Blood Church. There's little things like locations and enemy variants that serve to tell their own story. For example, there are some areas that are essentially inside the dreams of Great Ones. But with a little bit of observation, you can see parts of these dreams bleeding up or falling through the world, which tells you that these realms are layered and gives you some info about how these dreams overlap and interact with the real world. Or the blood liquors that you can find in two areas of the game, Canehurst and the Hunter's Nightmare. In the former, most of them are starving because there hasn't been ample blood there in some time. We don't have that problem. Gamer subs, you don't know who I had to sleep with to get this sponsor. Yeah, it's got a nice 100 milligrams of caffeine per serving, but more importantly, it's got 4,000% of your daily vitamin B12. My metabolism is currently running with the efficiency of a Chinese sweatshop. So click the link in the description and use my code for 10% off. Now back to blood liquors. Why did I write that line like fucking Henry David Thoreau? Whereas in the latter, they look like Pyrocynical left one of his mods on again. That's like the third pyro joke I've made in the last few videos. I'm not even that big of a fan. It's just such low-hanging fruit. Or even things as simple as the fact that enemy hunters use the same weapons and clothing as you do. It makes you feel like just another part of this already broken world. And they didn't have to do most of that. Tons of games have unexplained healing mechanics or enemies with exclusively their own special loadouts. But the fact that Bloodborne makes the effort to make those things truly envelop the world makes it feel that much more real. And that's not even to mention the push and pull that comes from the different characters and organizations that have each in their own way ripped this world apart. Which brings us to the next piece of the game that I want to bring up, the story. The story of Bloodborne starts, as many do, with ancient eldritch blood crypts. I think I missed a page. All of Yharnam is built on top of a series of catacombs called the Chalice Dungeons. Hey, that is awesome! Along with making Japanese people depressed and cigarettes. These were actually built by an ancient race known as the Tumerians. But the most important thing that these Tumerians actually did was find God. Ah, they're Catholic. Or any other religion if that joke made you mad. No, not that God, scary God, multiple of them. Until most of the scary gods decided to rapture themselves and ascend. Oh, they were Protestant. Or any other religion, except for a couple notable exceptions like Ebrietas, who did not ascend. Quick side note, holy fuck is she terrifying. I'll talk about it more later when I get into character and boss designs, but this is one of the only things in video games that makes me uncomfortable looking at it. Fast forward a little bit, there's this school called Byrgenwerth, led by this guy, Master Willem. Spider-Man! Byrgenwerth had the goal of trying to ascend to the level of Great Ones by using insight. One of the students of Master Willem was a dude named Gehrman. He recruits a chick named Maria, and they become the first two hunters. Their job is pretty simple, they kill shit. In the Chalice dungeons, Byrgenworth scholars found what they called the Old Blood, which was the blood of great ones, and also the healing blood that I was talking about earlier. One rogue scholar steals some of that blood and brings it to the nobles of Castle Cainhurst. Master Willem did not like the Old Blood. In fact, he adapted the adage, fear the Old Blood. His student Lawrence, on the other hand, wanted to juice that shit like Welch's. So he leaves Byrgenworth along with Gehrman and some others, and they found the Healing Church, which wants to ascend using blood and also administers blood to all of the locals to try and solve all their problems. Whoops. Everyone's werewolves. And now the Healing Church got to make a couple subsidiaries in order to deal with some of this, and no, they don't stop shilling blood like there's no tomorrow. Instead, they just send hunters to go zero Dark 30 people during the night. The church created two research divisions that would both eventually split off and start doing their own things. They make the choir, who are the ones who commune with friggin' Spooky Turbo over here, and they want to try and ascend through her, and they make the School of Mensis, who try to ascend through cages and murder. They actually got the closest. Gehrman got really sad and then made a deal with a Great One to create the Hunter's Dream, which made some select hunters basically immortal. Eventually, the Beast Scourge got so bad that they lit up all of Old Yarnum and then walled it off. Average 1945 Dresden, Germany experience. Along the way, there are like a couple different groups of hunters, but most of them dissolve. And then the church decided to privatize the industry and made a group of Healing Church hunters led by Ludwig. And these guys really kill people. Like, the description for their clothes is just, yeah, if you might get sick, we're just gonna fucking kill you. Also, Ludwig turned into a horse. Yeah, that YouTube deal's not treating you so good now, is it? Basically, everything's fucked. This is when the player shows up, gets a blood transfusion, and kills fucking everyone. Hunters, heads of state, old women, the works. Until eventually you kill enough people and drink enough blood that you either get your head cut off, become paraplegic, or reject humanity, become squid. Some of that's probably in the wrong order or a debated order, but it gets the point across well enough. And I think what really makes this story stand out is that despite the fact that it's technically about, cosmic beings and the eldritch truth, it's really about people, how they're each following the same goal through their own selfish means, sacrificing as many people as necessary to achieve their goal of ascension. Whether that be kidnapping people, torturing gods, or infecting and burning an entire city. And not only that, but the series is full of people at the heads of these institutions using their societal influence in order to twist public opinion and gain more power. With the greatest culprit obviously being the Healing Church. For example, when they decided to pit themselves against the vile bloods of Cainhurst, because guys, this game's got fictional racism. As I said, when the Old Blood was first discovered, one rogue Byrgenworth scholar decided to steal some and take it to the nobles of Cainhurst Castle. The Cainhurst residents came to be known as the Vile Bloods, but whether they gave themselves that name or the church gave them that name is a bit unclear. But what we do know is that in response to the Vile Bloods existing, the Healing Church threw a temper tantrum, labeled them heretics, and invented the KKK. Suddenly, there were no more Vile Bloods. Except for one, but she literally cannot die. Or the time that the church arguably poisoned the citizens of Yarnum in order to force them to take more blood so the church could acquire more power. Or the time that they illegally sold weapons to Iran in order to fund Nicaraguan Contras who also turned out to be drug traffickers. Oh wait, that was the CIA. But the best example of this is actually found not in the Healing Church, but in the early days of Byrgenworth. Shortly after Byrgenworth formed, it was reported that the corpse of a Great One had washed up on the shores of a local fishing village. And once news of this reached Master Willem, he went to Gehrman and Maria and was like, "We are killing fucking everyone. I don't care. You are taking your magic super weapons and waging war on these stupid fucking fish people. If there is not a golf ball sized hole in every toddler in this piss poor fucking fishing village, I will personally feed you to the dumpster skeletons." And so they did that, and all it really did was get a dead god to swear revenge on every hunter and lock them in an eternal nightmare after they died, so great hustle out there, guys. And I think all of those feed into why this story is so compelling, and that is that there's a genuine sense of cause and effect. Now, I know that sounds like a really stupid reason to like a game. Wow, things that happen can make other things happen. In other news, water is wet, the sky is blue, and the world will end in the next 50 years. But what Bloodborne does really well is showing that there's not just one inciting incident that leads to the events of the game. There's a bunch of incidents that snowball into each other. That's why I make all of the dumb historical and political jokes that I do. It's because I like learning about and following those chains of cause and effect. And all of that combines for an authentic feeling and explorable world. Which finally brings me to the gameplay. Yes, now we actually get to talk about playing the game. So I would like to officially introduce you to the man you've been seeing throughout this video, the one, the only Guns and Noses. Every single aspect of his face has been stacked into swag and schnoz, and he will be signing autographs after the show. This section is pretty weird for me to talk about because of all of the aspects of Bloodborne, the gameplay is probably the thing I care about the least. I know some people love FromSoft's hard but fair design philosophy to the point of attaching aspects of their personality to it. There's a reason that there are so many Dark Souls saved me videos, because these games resonate with people on a deeper level and give them a goal and something to strive for. I threw a temper tantrum when New Super Luigi U got slightly too difficult.
I just punched a piece of wood off the bottom of my table.
I think the story and world are fantastic and interesting. I love the level of detail. I just don't care much about the difficulty. I don't feel super rewarded when I beat a difficult section. So I just wanted to preface with that so that you understand that this isn't one of those videos that's like, I fought this boss and it was hard, and I fought the next boss and it was hard, and by the time I beat both bosses, I had a doctorate from Harvard. Unlike its Dark Souls cousins, Bloodborne makes the choice to remove starting classes. You can still pick origins that change your stat distributions, but it doesn't affect what equipment you start out with like it does in the other games. Which means at the very beginning of the game, every player starts out as more or less the same hunter, one who doesn't know how to use suspenders. I think this really improves that feeling of building a character from the ground up. From there you get to choose one of 3 starting trick weapons, one of 2 pistols, and just like that, a monster is set loose on the world's most handicap-inclusive town. The wheelchair population in Yharnam is staggering. It truly is heartwarming to see how inclusive they are when it comes to indiscriminate murder. The main thing that I think sets Bloodborne apart from other games is that it does a phenomenal job of teaching you how to play the game by letting the mechanics guide you. Central Yharnam is one of the best tutorial areas in gaming. The whole thing is a giant self-contained circle that beautifully teaches you what to expect from the rest of the game. And all capped off with one of the coolest tutorial bosses in gaming, Father Gascoigne. Gascoigne is a hunter gone mad, and to show this, he fights with the same weapons that were available to you at the start of the game. He uses a hunter's axe and the blunderbuss. Again, I'm a sucker for when games make enemies and bosses use the same weapons as you. It's cool. The first thing that will hit you like a semi-truck if you're not ready for it is that this fight and the rest of the game are fast, both in terms of enemy attacks, but also in terms of your abilities as well. Healing is quick, you can recover and dodge out of being stunned quickly. Insert sex joke. All of Gascoigne's attacks push forward, which means dodging backwards will probably get you killed unless you want to get serious distance. This over time teaches you that it's better to dodge to the side or through attacks if you want to keep doing damage. And he only increases in speed and ferocity as the fight continues, again, forcing the player to keep up. Because on top of the faster, more aggressive fights, you also don't have a shield to hide behind. Or at least not one that doesn't blow ass. You are always moving and dodging because just tanking hits really isn't an option. Instead, your parry option is a pistol, which does nothing for defense, very little for damage, but makes up for it with massive visceral damage if you time it right. But again, if you do take damage, the most resource-effective way for you to get that health back is to get in there and take it back. There are so many layers to the combat in this game that all combine to make fast-paced, in-your-face, bloody combat that just feels so good. And part of why it feels so smooth is because of the combos you can string together with quick weapon changes. Bloodborne's trick weapons add so much depth to this game's combat by letting you change what kind of weapon you're using mid-attack. My favorite example of this visually is the Kirk Hammer, which is a normal sword that sheathes into a giant stone hammer. Trick weapons are such a sick idea, and I hope they come back at some point. But the best change they made is getting rid of equip loads. Nothing is gonna make you fat roll through the Orphan of Cause. However, there is a secret weight mechanic that does increase stamina regeneration time, but nothing that's gonna affect your movement speed. This, again, makes sure that you can keep up with this game's pace of combat. If Bloodborne kept heavy armor and equip loads and just let you tank through combat, then there wouldn't be much of a point to the game, because it wants you to play fast, get in close, and get your hands dirty, and basically every mechanic in the game funnels you towards that playstyle. But as great as all of that is, it pales in comparison to Bloodborne's atmosphere. Bloodborne is a beautiful game. The art direction, especially in the cutscenes, is immaculate. The shot framing when entering new areas is breathtaking, giving you looming buildings or curling trees to latch onto visually. Arriving at the first lamp in Yahar'gul and finally seeing the blood moon loom overhead just left me in awe of what I was looking at. I think the purple sky as the blood moon rises is one of, if not my favorite skybox in all of video games. And the shot of the hunter standing alone in a field as the moon presence, the main power behind all of this, finally descends is just breathtaking. But my favorite part is the general atmosphere of each of the different areas and times of night. When you first arrive in Yharnam, it's sunset, so everything has this soft but uneasy orange tint. The streets of Yharnam are filled with beastly townsfolk who are constantly screaming at you. Better known as Democrats. Whew, I hadn't made a political joke in like 50 lines. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. I also think these dudes are some of the most quotable enemies in all of video games. My girlfriend has never played Bloodborne or anything close to it, but just from me saying it so much, away, away, is now part of her regular vocabulary. Or there's the snowy, haunted, forgotten vibe of Canehurst, with ghosts filling the castle and the final boss being a withered, frozen corpse. I've always wanted to visit the White House. I haven't made enough political jokes in this video, I gotta make up for it. Or the Hunter's Nightmare that's this twisted, misremembered amalgamation of Cathedral Ward. It's a punishment for the people here, and it looks like it. This place radiates with misery, and it's almost made more uncomfortable by the fact that it's like midday. Everything is in broad daylight, because the hunt is only supposed to last the night, but because these hunters lost themselves to the blood, they are forced into a hunt that never ends. Or the serene melancholy of the hunter's dream that just never sits quite right. But by far, the greatest atmosphere in the entire game comes from the Old Hunters DLC with the fishing hamlet. Did you say hamlet? To be or not to be, that is the question, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them to die to sleep no more. In pious sleep we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks the flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in the sleep of death what dreams may come. Okay, I'm not killing my retention with this. Remember how earlier in the video I said this game introduced me to things that I didn't even know I liked? Depressing fishing villages are my shit. There's a reason I try to wedge dredge footage into every video I can. This game is also sick. The fishing hamlet is beautifully ugly. By no means is it the most visually striking area in the game. Everything's washed out, hazy, and rotten. In contrast to the beautiful Gothic cathedrals of previous areas, everything here is scrapped together. In fact, one of the pieces that makes this area so cool is the obviously out-of-place giant clock tower head that you enter through. While every other area has a depressing overtone where you know something's gone horribly wrong, the fishing hamlet perfectly captures the atmosphere of an area being truly sad. A small village that had the misfortune of getting caught in the tides of ambitious minds and greater wills. I've gotten sick of listening to myself say stuff like, and what adds to that is, to transition topics, so segue, character designs. Holy shit, do the people and monsters in this game look fucking sick. The designs and outfits of the characters in this game are probably one of the biggest parts that sets this game apart from other FromSoft games visually. They are so strongly tied to this game's aesthetic. There is a reason that I feel like I have to wear this hat when I talk about this game. And the level of detail in all of the designs and outfits is absolutely astounding. My single favorite example of this is the Old Hunter's outfit. That has a belt tied around the right leg, because in the early days of the hunt, it was believed that the beast plague climbed up the right leg. The fictional murderers have superstition. That's some awesome world building shit. If you get one thing out of this video, I hope it's that world building is sick. Or there's the prostitute, Ariana.
Oh my, what a quiescent.
Yes, it is. Who, if you're observant, you'll notice is wearing a noble dress that comes from Canehurst, which links this common whore to fucking Castlevania over here through her clothing. Or how if you put on the doll's clothes, you look really funny. How you holding up there, Guns? Awesome. Queen Annalise of the Vilebloods has this captive nobility look to her, where she still sits on her throne and acts all regally, except that she got Man in the Iron Mask and now has to wear this sick-ass helmet. She has this very simple and subdued design that doesn't diminish her status. I think it's really cool. Also, if you ever wonder why she talks really weird and says stuff like, "We are prisoner to this wretched mask," even though she's the only one here, it's because she talks using the royal we, which is a thing that kings and queens used to do to refer to themselves as the representations of all of their subjects. It's her little verbal cue that maintains her status. It's a really cool detail. Fun fact, another video game monarch who also speaks in the royal we is the Queen Bee from Super Mario Galaxy. This has nothing to do with Bloodborne or character designs, but I know this, and now so do you. But enough with the boring, regular schmegular people. Let's talk about the bosses. Vicar Amelia is one of the few bosses who we get to see transform from human to beast, but this transformation is on a whole other level. So we see this small, faith-driven woman. Hell, she's a vicar. And the most notable thing for them to show us is that she's holding this gold pendant incredibly tightly. We see her shadow contort, blood covers the statue, and now you're looking at this giant deer wolf. She's still wearing her tattered religious robes. You can see her sleeves hanging around her neck. Plus the fact that even though she's a beast, she's still holding her pendant into her chest for most of her attacks. And the time that she pulls it in closest is during her death animation. She believed in the church so much that even as a full beast, as she died, the most important thing to her was her faith. All of those aspects layered on top of each other make for an awesome and emotionally powerful boss. The One Reborn is this horrifying amalgamation of human bodies and sinew and muscle and bone. It's where the School of Mensis' kidnapped bodies went in a failed attempt to make a great one. Gehrman, in the course of one cutscene, goes from a sad, shriveled old man into a bona fide hunter. His crumpled hat straightens into an elegant top hat. His old, raggedy clothes become a finely aged hunter's uniform. He rises from his wheelchair and accepts that he has one final beast to kill. But my favorite detail about this fight comes from one of its mechanics. At different points in the game, you can challenge both Gehrman and Maria, the first hunters. If you visit the Hunter's Workshop in the Waking World, you can find an item called the Old Hunter's Bone, which belonged to one of Gehrman's old students and allows you to learn the lost art of quickening. And when you fight both Gehrman and Maria, they both use the art of quickening. They are the Old Guard, the last pillars of an age of regret. The Orphan of Kaz, the unnaturally born child of a dead god, ripped from his mother's womb by the hunters and scholars I just discussed. As the host of a nightmare made to punish people like you, he knows only one thing. You are his enemy. Ludwig the Accursed, former leader of the Church Hunters, is reduced to this horseman-beast amalgamation that knows nothing but blood and death. His torn hunter's garb in his back, covered in hair and arms and legs, a mouth that's filled with eyes. His face has been unnaturally lengthened. He rages and stampedes like a thoughtless beast, a shell of what he used to be. But then, halfway through the fight, he's knocked down and something falls off his back.
All along. My true mentor, my guiding moonlight.
He stands, and as he does, his music transitions from more typical boss fight music into a waltz, and he begins to fight, remembering the hunter he used to be. Moonlight greatsword in hand, he fights and dies with his ideals untarnished. But my personal favorite and most terrifying boss is Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos. Of the great ones that you fight in Bloodborne, Ebrietas is certainly one of the most classically Lovecraftian. Her name partly comes from a species of butterfly, which might explain the wing-like appendages that she has protruding from her back. She has a slug-like lower half. Her upper half is covered in tentacles and growths. And her face is, I don't even want to look at it. It splits down the middle with eyes covering the inside and these weird growths protruding from it. She's gross, and again, one of the few things in video games that makes me uncomfortable looking at it. But while she is scary, she's not cosmically scary, which leads me to my critique of this game and why this video is named what it is. Bloodborne is very inspired by H.P. Lovecraft and cosmic horror. But as a cosmic horror game, it kinda sucks. When you say H.P. Lovecraft or cosmic horror, or hentai, weirdly enough, people think of Cthulhu, big tentacle monsters that are weird to look at. But in my opinion, that's not what makes Lovecraftian horror scary, and it's not what made it scary to Lovecraft. Now, I'm not gonna pretend like I've read everything Lovecraft's ever written, so maybe there's stuff in his other works that disprove the point I'm about to make, but I've read some of his most famous works. Call of Cthulhu, Shadow over Innsmouth, The Nameless City, etc. Lovecraft was an agoraphobe, and a xenophobe, and an outright racist. Not even, like, product of his time racist. Even for back then, it was bad. And his fear and intolerance of basically everything he couldn't understand is what led him to create these eldritch beings. The thing that makes eldritch horror scary isn't big monsters, it's that they're unknown. They are unfathomable to humans. They are so complex that they are averse to our understanding of them. They're beings that are so unknowable that trying to comprehend them drives you mad. They're essentially a metaphorical representation of something like the deep sea or the cosmos. It's their grandiosity mixed with our own insignificance that makes them so terrifying, which is already a difficult genre to translate not only to a visual medium, but an interactable one. If the story is about something that's so grandiose that looking at it drives people mad, it's much easier to communicate that through a written medium where the reader fills in the details as opposed to a visual one where everything is shown to you. While Bloodborne sets itself up as cosmic horror-y in its second act, the game's structure and goals directly oppose what makes that scary. The story of Bloodborne is that an immigrant shows up, gets superpowers, and then in the space of a single night, kills and usurps a god. You might notice there's some problems with this. While yes, many of this game's story beats and themes align with cosmic horror, those themes don't really carry over to the player. The classic FromSoft model of get souls, get good, level up, kill bigger and badder things makes for a hypocritical narrative when you're using a genre that thrives on human insignificance. And while there are certain in-game mechanics that try to simulate this effect, namely the frenzy mechanic, it's not enough to emulate that fear of the unknown. This game tells you that these beings are vast and unknowable to the point of destroying society, and then tasks you with killing them. Which in essence should be like if the game said, okay, go kill the Mariana Trench. What, like everything in it? No, the very concept of it. When you introduce giant cosmic monsters, it is very tempting to make them killable. I love Pacific Rim and Godzilla as much as the next guy. But when you do that to cosmic horror, it fundamentally undermines the horror aspect. And I think what best exemplifies this are the game's endings. As I said way earlier, Bloodborne has 3 endings. In the first one, Gehrman releases you. There is no big final fight. You forget the dream and awake and watch the sun rise over Yharnam. Your hunt is over. In the second, you challenge Gehrman, twist his fucking head off, and then replace him as the keeper of the hunter's dream. In the third, you go out of your way to munch on some umbilical cords, which lets you fight the moon presence itself. And once you kill it, you ascend beyond the hunt, beyond humanity, and become a great one. And obviously, this is supposed to be the most satisfying ending. You finally kill and become the ultimate power. But it also ruins the themes and warnings that the story has set up for you up to that point. Sure, every other character went mad or turned into a beast, but not you. You're special. You are an unstoppable force, both mentally and physically, that's never before been seen in Yharnam. You are a migrant worker. That ending vindicates all of the ruthless scholars who came before you because you got there on the backs of their discoveries. Because despite the lengths Willem and the others went to and how mad they seemed, that ending proves that they were right. And at the same time removes the horror and hopelessness that comes from trying to understand the unknown in exchange for a standard level up power fantasy. In the second ending, you just become another cog, just another replacement slave to the Great Ones, which leaves the most thematically satisfying ending as the least narratively and mechanically satisfying ending. You let Gehrman kill you, you forget everything you've learned, the cycle continues on without you, and you live on in ignorant bliss. Because that's the only ending that acknowledges that the eldritch truth only leads to pain and madness. At many points in this game was I curious and unsettled and disgusted, but it never made me think of anything greater than myself. Because the game is always telling you, get more levels and kill that fucking god. But at the end of the day, I will always forgive this game for that and any other issue it has. Floating statue, 30 FPS, horrible load times, patches as a spider. Because despite the thing I said earlier about Harvard, it's no exaggeration to say that Bloodborne changed my life. Again, not in the it saved my life way. This game has never been my purpose. But as I said in the beginning, this game introduced me to many of my favorite genres, mainly eldritch horror. I wouldn't have read the things that fuel that big complaint if it wasn't for Bloodborne. I wouldn't have started reading Berserk, which is slowly becoming one of my favorite things ever, if it wasn't for Bloodborne. This game completely changed how I look at story, themes, and atmosphere. Which, for a guy whose life currently revolves around talking about those things, is pretty fucking big. I honestly don't think I will ever watch, read, or play anything the same way again, thanks to Bloodborne. So with that, the night is near its end. Thanks for over 10K, subscribe, and go watch this video where I talk about how Hollow Knight is faking perfection.